Thank you, everyone, and welcome back to From Fear to Fearless. This show is all about sharing stories of ordinary people who have done and continue to do extraordinary things despite their fear. Fear is the normal part of growth and change, but for many of us, especially for children, fear becomes a factor and they have hard time pushing past their fears. So this show is dedicated for sharing those stories of people who have pushed past their fears. So today I have a special guest who has been on my podcast, and her name is Deirdre, right? Did I get that right?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay,
Well
perfect.
done.
Deirdre Morrison is an applied neuroscience facilitator using research backed techniques to help her clients unlock their creative and personal potential. Deirdre is the co-founder of the NeuroDevelopment Institute and draws on experience ranging from martial arts to art and design while helping her clients understand their brain and its role in their actions, reactions, and interactions. I love your topic. Welcome, and it's nice to have you again.
It's great to be back. Thank you so much, Kahila. I really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. So I was looking at some of the notes you've sent me, and I have gathered that your title for the show was "The Science of Fear" and how understanding our brain can help us overcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, I mean, this is one of the things I think that the more that we understand ourselves, the more we understand our brains, the more we understand what's going on in there, how and why we create fear or feelings of fear, the easier it is to manage it.
Yes, absolutely. So this show is about sharing something that you overcome or you have helped
Mm.
someone overcome. Do you have
Mm.
anything that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I think there is a story that will probably resonate with people. It's a story that about my gran, and my gran is 94 years old now, and she still lives on her own, and she is a very fiercely independent woman and has always done everything for herself. But as people get older, things start to go wrong with the body, and over the last few years, she's had a series of mini strokes.
Mm,
I think they call them TIAs. And after one of these TIAs, she started hallucinating. She was
mm,
having auditory and visual hallucinations. So again, my grand, she's really, really sharp for her age. She is, she hasn't lost any of her kind of mental clarity or anything like that. But when this started happening to her, she was really, really worried because she didn't understand what was happening. She thought maybe she was going to have to go into a care home or something, that she wouldn't be able to look after herself anymore. And this was really, really worrying her and causing her to withdraw.
mm.
This fear that she had that her independence was coming to an end was causing her to go into herself and not talk about this. And my mom and dad, bless her, they live next door, and they very much contribute to her day-to-day well-being and so on. But they didn't understand what was going on either. And because of her age, I think they kind of expected that something like this would happen. And, my grand's mental faculties would start to decline. And yes, she would need to go to a care home. So as far as they were concerned, this was the natural order of things. So my gran was there very, very worried for her future. And I recognized what had happened. I could tell that there had been a sequence of events, and I said, okay, so describe to me what's happening. Tell me when you see these things, when you hear these things, tell me about it. So she said, well, I see flowers everywhere. Everywhere I look, there are flowers
Mm.
and trellis fences and sometimes little children. And I hear buzzing like bees in my ears. So I just did a little bit of research and realized that what she was experiencing is actually called Charles Bonnet syndrome.
Okay.
So what was happening was the brain, there was a little bit of damage had been done somewhere in the networks that provide her with her visual senses and her auditory senses. And what the brain was doing is really, really clever. The brain was going, okay, well, if we just let it like this for now, it'll be a big black hole in what she is supposed to be seeing. So we're just going to fill in a little bit like, if you clone something on Photoshop, the brain
Mm.
just filled in those empty spaces with things that people normally report seeing in this condition. But it's something that tends to pass after a few weeks. So as soon as I was able to say, look, Gran, this is something that's quite normal after a little mini stroke, and you're probably going to see that this will disappear in a week or two. You'll be back to normal. And as soon as she understood that, the fear dissolved, because she knew what was going on in her brain. She knew it was part of the recovery process, and that she was going to be okay again. So, that for me is a really good example of how understanding something that's happening in our brain can really reassure us and give us the confidence to allow the process to take place.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Because even for kids, right? Because we don't really know what the other person is seeing or hearing or doing. Like we only have our perception, right?
Yeah.
Like I used to be in a classroom where I thought, why is this black or whiteboard so blurry? Why is he writing so blurry? But it was my eyesight. For everyone else, it was clear. It was my eyesight. So then I went really close and sat close to the, front of the room, and it started making sense. It was, I have to go check my eyesight. It's the sort of same thing, right? You
Yeah.
don't know what the other person's feeling, thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And as kids, in a lot of instances, we don't have the experience to understand that. So for an adult, if their sight is blurry, they'll think, oh, well, yeah, I must get my eyes checked. But, if that's been your only experience, you don't necessarily know that there can be something different.
Yes, yes. So your story brings, if we bring that to a child experience and something, for me, it's all about learning to learn, right? Even
Mhm.
during those episodes, a child doesn't know why they're not learning, and then they start blaming themselves,
Mm, mm.
right? It's like they're not good enough, they're dumb, or they don't have the smart genes.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the right, my son, who's now 15, very, very different from his sister, who's a couple of years older than him. And when they were tiny, when they were just starting school, it was clear that Tara would be fine wherever she went to school, because she's very very bright, very academic, picked things up really quickly. But for my son, it was different, because he had very delayed language, and his communication wasn't as we would have expected at that age. So one of the things for us as parents and for him as an individual was this chasm, I guess, this gap between our experience and his experience.
Mm.
And I think this is something that is really, really important, because kids pick up on our fears and our projections of what will happen for them in the future as well. So, for a lot of my relatives and so on, it was quite difficult, I think, the choices that I made, which were to send both children actually to a non-mainstream school, because I knew that in that environment, he would be allowed to develop at his own pace. And I think this is really, really important, that we as parents can face our fears about what expectations are, societal expectations, what our worries are for our kids' futures, and also not feed whatever concerns and fears our children might have about themselves. Because if we are stressing, they pick up on that. It's not what we say to them, it's what we model to them.
Yep.
So this, I think, is one of the important things, that we have to work out, how do we feel about this? Is there something, if our child is having difficulty learning, if our child is not keeping up with that academic track or whatever it is there something in us that they're maybe picking up on as well, in terms of how we are dealing with this? Is this a process where we are actually collaborating with them, or are we trying to do it some other way?
And how do you think a parent can model that? Because it's hard, because when your child's not performing their at the milestones of other children, and you notice it, and you tend to feel fear, right? I mean, it's automatic. So how do you?
Yeah. So how well, we need to interrogate what that is. We need to understand, from our own perspective as adults, why is it that we are having these concerns? It is a little bit like, we enter our children into this race at maybe 5 or 6 years of age, whatever it is, and nobody's really sure why they're running it. I mean, is there a good answer to why they've got to finish their education at a certain age, why they've got to hit these milestones at a certain age. I mean, this is, I don't know whether this is helpful or not, but I genuinely, I'm quite prepared to dispense with the expectations that are placed on children. And I think expectation is a lot to do with fear as well, because, we've got the expectations that we have of ourselves. We want to be good parents. We want to be the sort of parent who provides for our children and gives them the opportunities that will help them to thrive and help them to get on in life. We've got the expectations of other people on us. If we choose a different route, or if we, if our kids are not performing whatever way they're expected to perform, we've got other people, maybe we feel judgment from them. And then, of course, so those expectations of ourselves, the expectations of others, and there is a third kind of expectation, and it momentarily escapes me. It'll come back in a minute. So the expectations then, I guess, of our kids, how they see themselves, how they want to be seen, because they are also always trying to, they do want our approval. They want to know that they're loved, that they belong, that we're proud of them. And in actual fact, what we're trying to get to is a stage where they are proud of their own achievements and they don't need that external validation for it.
Absolutely. So with your line of work, understanding the brain, so how can we help? This is what I do in my work too, is getting to talk to your brain, right? So that you can really have this conversation ongoing. It's not a separate thing from you. You're in control of it, right? You probably believe in that part as well. Like what our brain is doing is our control, not its own control.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is the important thing, really, is to understand that, we have emotions for a reason. We have fear for a reason. And that reason is because our brain wants to keep us safe. It wants us to survive. It wants us to stay alive. And the full range of emotions that we have are signals from our body about things that our brain is picking up on and wants us to respond to. So if we take, for instance, what actually happens in the body when we feel fear, for instance, everybody feels these things slightly differently, but you can imagine somebody who's feeling fear might feel very jittery in the tummy. They might, they mightn't be able to settle or sleep. They might, their mind might be racing about this thing. But the thing is that can be interpreted. These sensations in our body can be interpreted as fear. But in actual fact, we also have sensations in the body that are very similar to that when we are excited for something or looking forward to something. So one of the things that we can do, one of the things that we can help people with, is to ground them in their body and to help them to notice what's going on in the body, because we have to distinguish between the sensations that we're having and our identity. So it's not that we are afraid, we are feeling afraid, and we're interpreting certain body sensations as that feeling of fear. But when we can name these, and when we can, I guess, identify what's going on in my body, is my mouth dry? Am I clenching my jaw? Am I feeling tense somewhere? Then we can work on letting that go. We can actually be grounded and be mindful about what is going on in the body, so that we can recognize it and appreciate it, and then maybe think, okay, why am I feeling like this? Is it because I'm worried about the consequence of what's going to happen if, for instance, we're doing a test paper or something like that, or I've got to hand in a piece of work? Am I worried about what's going to happen? So these are, I guess, just ways to understand the feelings. And when we understand and we can name the feelings, we have a lot more control and choice over them. And we can express them to people better as well. And this is where we can open up communication, I guess, with parents, with teachers, and so on, if we are younger.
I think I'm just going back to your grandma story. It's ageless, right? Because what you did for her was to understand her, what she was feeling.
Yeah,
Was
that's it.
name it, call it, and was able to put a name to it, because now she understands when that comes, it's trying to repair, right? Before it was like, why is this happening to me? Versus,
Yeah, that's very true. And again, these feelings that we have, these emotions that we have, whether they're to do with schoolwork or whether they're to do with anything else in our life, then we're going to come up with these things again and again. And if we can practice understanding them and recognizing them and knowing that they will pass, using maybe some breathing techniques or some grounding techniques or whatever it is to help the body get past them, to recognize that our body has our body and our brain together have very strong responses to things that they find threatening because it wants to keep us safe.
Mhm.
So understanding that is a key to an awful lot of new ways to see things.
Yeah. And as parents listening to this, I think, behavior, we take these emotions as behaviors too, right? Because they turn into behaviors from a child. So
Hmm.
then we're dealing with that behavior versus the feeling. So they're two different things.
Yeah, that's right. That's a really good point. And they say that all behavior is communication,
Mhm.
and the same goes for those emotions that we're feeling. Those emotions are trying to communicate um, what we are perceiving in the situation. So whether it's fear or whether it's joy or whether it's anger, any of these things, we are perceiving something and we are interpreting the sensations that come to us through our body, and then we are giving them this meaning and this
Yes.
physical, I guess, and emotional interpretation.
Hmm. I think one of the first fears parents notice is when the child doesn't want to do something, right?
Mm.
But they throw a tantrum, or they're on the floor crying, or they're
Mm.
hiding, or all of those. But there is a fear usually associated with why they don't want to do what they're asked to do, including going
Mm.
to school sometimes.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll tell you another story about about something similar to that. And yes, I agree absolutely that in a lot of instances, it can be about worrying about the stress that someone might feel, the boredom that someone might feel, the inadequacy that someone might feel whenever they are doing something that maybe doesn't doesn't feel good to them.
Mhm.
But there was one time and one time only that I refused to go to school. Now, my brother, who was a couple of years younger than me, refused to go to school every day for 2 years, his
Mhm.
first 2 years in school. I loved it. I never refused to go. But this one time, for some reason, my brother was getting to go to the city with my mom and my gran, and I wasn't. I was supposed to go to school, and I just point blank refused to go in and wouldn't tell them why. So it's not always as dramatic as a fear, but I didn't explain to them why I didn't want to go in either, because I didn't think, I suppose, that would wash as an explanation for not going to school.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's just a little aside. It's a slight sidetrack from what we were talking about.
Yeah, but I find that behaviors are stemming from some sort of fear. As you said, communication is the key to all,
Mhm.
and opening up that when it's happening,
Mm.
instead of responding to that behavior, opening up a conversation to ask why is that behavior showing up and what's behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we as parents, as people, really, a lot of the time we can really only make up what we are, how we're interpreting what we're seeing.
Mhm.
And the question is, I guess, do we have the patience and do we have the personal awareness to actually stop and think, right, hang on a second, what is going on here? Are we able to give this the time
Mhm.
um, to understand what it is that our child is communicating to us?
Yes.
Um, and that, I think, is really important because we're so busy doing things. We have so much going on in our lives, and quite often, we just I often think, that we expect children to run to adult timetables. And, you know, why?
Yeah.
We have such busy lives and everything is so timed and so organized and so packed. And kids, they want to sit and look at a worm for 48 minutes whilst we're, trying to get out the door. And it's up to us, I think, to understand what our responses are in those situations as well. But when we can do that, when it's something, then we can start to understand them a little bit better too.
Absolutely. So here's our last question for you is what would
Hmm.
you tell your younger self about fear?
What would I tell my younger self about fear? I would tell my younger self about fear that it's a really interesting part of our makeup, and that it is something that when we understand why and how we have it, then it becomes a whole lot easier to navigate.
Mm, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Thank you so much for being here today. Our show usually goes a little bit longer, but because of our time today, I want to invite you on another show for sure
Oh,
in
thank
the
you.
upcoming months because I want to ask you more about what you do and the
Mm.
work you've been doing to help parents. I know you have a big side of the business and your passion is towards that. So I would like you to come back another time
Oh,
and
thank you.
make up opening in your schedule.
Well, look, that would be lovely. And if any of your viewers want to talk about something in particular, by all means,
Yes.
let me know, and then we'll try and work all that in.
Yes, I will have your contact information in our show notes later so they can connect with you. Thank you so much for being here. I know you have a busy schedule. You have to pick up your son soon. So you're on the other side of the world. So thank you for making the time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Gohila. Night, everyone.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning into the show. We will go live again Wednesday at 11 a.m. PST. We were early today because of my timing. So if you're interested in making learning easy for your child, please book a free call with our certified learning success coaches at Learning Success Academy. Until next time, see what's on the other side of fear. Thank you so much.